Hi, my name is Dave Cranage, Operations Field Sales Engineer for Sage X3. Today we're going to take some time to review the Plan to Produce overview demonstration. To get started, let's go ahead and log in as my user ERPUS. And that's going to bring me to my home screen. In prior demos, we've talked about the value of the home screen as being sort of a landing spot for me to start my day. The home screen is based on role-based permissions or group-based permissions. So in the upper left-hand side of the screen, you can see that I have a set of role-based, what we call landing pages, and a default role-based landing page called manufacturing. Landing pages are made up of tabs, and on those tabs are widgets. So for example, you see at the top of my page tab a navigation widget that allows me to jump quickly to some of the main functions that I do throughout the day. We also have the ability within the home page to have my landing pages. So you'll see I have a few down here. And I want to start off kind of our demonstration today. I'm going to hit my landing page called My SDNA Dashboards. And I've focused right in on the manufacturing dashboard for SDNA. And it's important to understand that SDNA, the SDNA engine leverages system data, right? And multiple systems, but most importantly, the X3 system data. And it provides accurate information and real-time visibility as well as analysis that gives improved operational efficiency, right? The more knowledgeable you are about what's going on a day-to-day basis across different shifts, across different employees, across different product lines, across different sites, you're going to gain a competitive advantage over your competitors that don't have this type of visibility. So quickly, I wanted to point out, we've talked about this in the past. You'll probably get a few more demos to talk about it as well, but I wanted to point out at the top that we have what are called slicers. So today we're going to be spending a lot of our time in the North American companies. So if I can grab those quickly, you'll see that now all my data has been filtered to just the North American site or companies. And then if I get into the sites here, maybe I'm only interested in food products. And again, as you see in the background, as I make those selections, the benchmarks that are at the top, these are benchmarks, and then the KPIs that are here that make up the meat of the dashboard, they all adjust in real time. And that's the strength that's going to be given to a line manager, a general manager of a facility, an operations manager, and all of this can be tailored to the needs and requirements of the particular person. Permission controlled, so there's governance at the right level. I can't see what I shouldn't, and I certainly can see what I should. And then, of course, I'm not going to get into it right now, but drill down into each of these different KPIs to look at further detail and the ability to drill all the way into the actual transaction that occurred within the different functions within X3. The other thing I want to quickly point out is the ability to use inquiries or queries, if you will, and requesters to grab or mine data out of the database, be able to use it for quick access. So if I wanted to access a particular work order, a click of a hyperlink URL of the work order number, and I'm in looking at that particular work order. But I also have the ability, I'm not going to actually execute it today, but I also have the ability to export this stuff to Excel. So if I want to take a lot of that raw data, push it out into an Excel spreadsheet, and use that to further enhance into a graph or into some sort of presentation for maybe my bank or whatever it may be, I can do that. So that moves us down to my landing page called My Fast Start Demo. And this is where we're going to be spending most of our day today as we go through the Plan to Produce business processes. And so before I dive into that, I thought it might be helpful to kind of talk a little bit about Plan to Produce. Plan to Produce encompasses the processes that balance customer demand with manufacturing resources. resulting in the efficient procurement and production of materials used in the creation of finished goods. And really what we're talking about is there's going to be a demand for our products. We have a supply of those products and or the raw materials or resources that are needed to manufacture those products. And the plan to produce process is the process by which we go through analyzing that to make sure that we do the right things to have the products that our customers want to buy. As a part of plan to produce, I think it's also important to touch on the sort of the background tools that we use within the different functions of the plan to produce processes. First and foremost, products. Product master is where we define the products, parameters, attributes, and other critical aspects or elements of the product, whether that product be a finished good, a intermediate, a service, a subcontracted element of a product, or a raw material. It's that product master that we go to gather more information about that particular product and how it is utilized within our version of X3. The product site, because we are a system of multi, right? We can have many, many different sites that may be in many different countries and so forth. And so there are different parameters that are specific to the product at the site level, whether that be a vendor or a standard cost calculation or how we may do quality assurance or whatever it may be. That product site definition is critical to the way that X3 operates and how we specifically handle products within those different sites that we can set up. The bill of materials is the list of raw materials, sub-assemblies, intermediate assemblies, subcomponents, parts, and the quantities that are needed to manufacture the associated product. So a product has a bill of materials. That's in essence its recipe, what we need to do, what we need to use from a component perspective to build that end product. And then routing are the steps that we take and the time that are required to produce that particular product. And then when you look at the production slip, it's a global view of the BOM and the routing that gives us a perspective of everything brought together, just kind of puzzled together into a structure that helps us understand all aspects of the given product. And then, of course, the standard cost is that standard cost that we have calculated for the particular product, but it's also the detail behind that. What's the material cost, what's the labor cost, what's the overhead, and how did we roll that up to get our standard overall cost for the product? And all of these are available for quick access with a click of a button. But where I want to focus today is on this visual process map that I've created for us. And that visual process map represents the different steps or, different points within the plan to produce process. And at this point, at the beginning of the plan to produce process really is that demand we talked about. And demand can be generated two different ways, typically within the plan to produce process. The first is using a forecast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into our forecasting tool within X3. And you say, well, okay, do I have to use a forecast? Why a forecast? If we get plenty of orders, then we know what we need to make and so on. Well, it's more complex than that. Forecasting is critical to ensure that a business doesn't exceed demand for a product or run out of the necessary materials while making it. The key thing about forecasts, it's an interesting sort of dichotomy. Forecasts are always wrong, right? But a forecast that is 20% wrong and 80% right is better than never forecasting, because that's 100% wrong. And so the forecast gives us foresight or predictability into the future, perhaps based on historical, record or knowledge. But the forecast helps us predict what we're going to need based on our knowledge of our product line and our customers. And so the other thing that's critical to an accurate forecast as where needed is something called the trend profile, right, or seasonality, if you will. So the ability to apply a bit of a curve or variation across the time that's been defined that will vary how much we're going to need within that forecast by that seasonality. So if I pop over here, I've already kind of got it on the screen, but if I go to NA21, which is our food product site, and our Fin 301, which is the jalapeno dip that we're going to use for our demonstration today, you'll see that I have this forecast, and this forecast stretches from January of 2019 all the way to the end of this year. So we're almost there. And you'll see that based on a total for that time frame, we've defined a monthly total and broken those monthly totals down into specific weekly totals. There's several different ways you can configure this. You can utilize the calculation engine to do this, but this is based on manual input. It is not using historical information from X3 to calculate the forecast. It's taking your profile, it's taking your distribution method, your time period, and your quantity, and it's determining across that spectrum, across that horizon, how much product is going to be needed on each month and each week of each month. So you can see here we're seeing that full forecast perspective. If customers do want a more powerful forecasting tool that does utilize historical data, X3 has, or Sage has, a tool called Inventory Advisor, and then Sage also has an integration to a very powerful tool called Forecast Pro. So those are options. You also have the ability to do an offline calculation utilizing something like Microsoft Excel, and then import that in to represent the forecast like we're looking at here. Okay, so this is one way to generate the demand that we use in the plan to produce process. Let's minimize that or pop out of there for a second, talk about the other way, and that's actual sales orders. So in this particular case, let's go ahead and create a new sales order. This will be our representation of demand, and we'll use our customer NA06 Cisco supply. One of the great things we talked about when it comes to sales orders, quotes, invoices and so forth, is that customers and products, they have a referenceability, right? So in this particular case, this customer immediately pops up as I reference back to its customer master, a note regarding the customer itself, a little pop-up, a little tool that we have. I'm going to jump down to the lines. I'm going to put in our product, Fin 301. And again, referenceability, it's going to go out. It's going to figure out our pricing for this particular product and volume that we're buying. So again, the ability within X3 to connect all of these transaction sets, right? To connect customers to products, products to pricing, and so forth. In this particular case, we want 250. Looks like we have plenty. I go ahead and say create that sales order, and that sales order just generated demand, right? We did a allocation. We can produce our order acknowledgement at this point if we want to. That order acknowledgement can be emailed directly to the customer. In my case, I'm going to just throw it quickly on the screen so you guys can see that. And then once we've got that, we're going to take a move to the next step in the process, and that is analyzing our supply and our demand. So before I get there, let me just pop this to the screen for you guys. And there's the order acknowledgement, okay, for the 250 cases. So let's go ahead and pop out. And at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to run MRP. And so MRP provides planning logic necessary to make or buy only what is needed when it's needed, right? In essence, it answers kind of three critical questions. What are the items that are required? What are the items that we need? How many items are required, and when are those items required? It takes a look at our supply, compares it against the demand, and then determines what we need to get in order to meet that demand. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. And this function, in essence, is a modeling tool, right? It's planning current and future material requirements, and then it's going to produce for us the results, right? And those results are what we call suggestions. And those suggestions come in the form of work order suggestions. Let me scroll down here quickly and show you. They come in the form of work order suggestions, purchase order suggestions, intersite transfer suggestions, subcontract suggestions. So if some of the products that have been requested need to be manufactured, and some of that manufacturing requires an outside source, like a third-party vendor or something of that nature, a subcontractor, then we can also suggest those subcontract orders as well. So it's gone and it's made those suggestions, and then based on other parameters, again, kind of going back to the product site, we define our planning parameters within the product and product site, and that MRP looks at those things like economic order quantity, safety stock, and so forth, and then determines for us what needs to be purchased and or manufactured. In our case today, we're doing plan to produce, so we're only looking at the manufacturing side of this. There's another demonstration on procure to pay, which will talk about how we go through that procurement process to also purchase those raw materials and other items that go into the manufacturing process as well. So in this particular case, I'm going to grab that Fin 301, the jalapeno dip that we've been working with, and I'm going to say search. And so the system has looked at the parameters that we have, that order for 250 cases that we just put in, the demand that exists through the forecast, other global and detailed allocations that are made against this particular product. It's also looked at, what our safety stock level is, and based on all that information, it's determined that even though it looked like we had enough, cases of jalapeno dip, when we do that calculation and it projects out into the future, it recognizes right away that, hey, we really could use to make another 43 cases. So before I do that, I just want to point out a couple of the things here. Under manufacturing, as a planner, what I have the ability to do is use this enterprise planning workbench, and it becomes a support tool for my planning making decisions, but it also is a place where I can operate all the different things I need to do from, right? So one of the things I may need to do is create new work orders on the fly, not just out of suggestions. So this manufacturer option lets me pick my specific product and define my stock quantity, start date, end date, particular BOM and routing code, and drive through a planned or firm work order. I also have the ability to use what's called the grouping workbench. So if I had a couple different suggestions here for the jalapeno dip, I might select those and a bunch of them and group them or consolidate them into a single work order. Again, purpose is really just to make my life easier and utilize this as a tool, a decision and support tool for myself. So I'm going to go ahead and grab our suggestion here, and I'm going to tell the system that I want to plan or initiate. So I'm using my action card, and you can see there's several different things I can do here. Most of these are to support me in my process of decision making. One of the most important ones in here, not that they're all not important, but the management data, if I dive in there quickly, it's a consolidated view of information from both the product and the product site, as well as some of the stock availability information that might be critical for me to understand at the time that I'm deciding whether to hold a work order back and just keep it as a planned work order, as a suggestion, or roll it right through into a firm work order. So you can see that it's consolidating a lot of that information at my fingertips so that I can make better decisions about what I'm going to do. In our case, it's a pretty straightforward decision. We need a work order to create 42 more cases, and so we're going to do that. And in my case, I'm going to just say DCs 12, 23, 20 work order is my description. You don't have to put in a description, but I like to. And let's go ahead and release that work order. And now we come back into the grid and into the planning workbench, and it's showing us that we have now a firm work order. But if I scroll out here, that particular work order was originally a suggestion, and the suggestion document or suggestion transaction numbers here as well. So again, we have that traceability, that interconnectivity of the different transactions that are going on. And so at this point, let's get out of this planning workbench. I also do want to point out that X3 does have the ability to take that same capability within the planning process and put it into the batch server and automate the release of work orders into production. And those automated releases are based on specific parameters or rules that you set to determine what ones do and don't get released. So you could have a set of work orders that are getting released automatically, and another set of work orders that are being managed by the planner within the planning workbench and only being released manually on a regular or semi-regular interval. So you can combine the two different tool sets. So at this point, let's dive into our work orders, right? So we've created some demand. We processed MRP. MRP went out, said, hey, what do we need? When do we need it? How much do we need? And so forth. It produced the suggestion for us. Now, again, we're only focusing on the manufacturing side. We're not focusing on the procurement side. We'll touch on that in another demo. But we saw that it suggested we had a work order. That work order, we then took the suggestion and turned it into a firm working order. Work order, I should say. And if I go and say today, and I say, so using my selection within the work order, I can say today, I find our new work order. You can see here is our product that we're producing, the jalapeno dip. It has a pending line status. We haven't actually started working on it yet. Our release quantity of 43, right? So that information is here, but if I scroll down a little bit, you'll see also my scheduling information, priority, as well as routing information. I keep going down a little bit, and now I'm looking at the components. These components come from our BOM, right? The required quantities are driven from the quantities that are defined within the BOM itself. Here's how much has been allocated. We have no shortages. Had we had a shortage or a dependency on another item that was in shortage, we would see that here. We have our available quantity, and then you'll see our allocation is global, right? It's a global allocation. It hasn't been tied to a specific lot or stock line transaction. And then we scroll down a little bit further, and then we have our operations. Now, this particular manufacturing routing or list of operations or our planned operations, it's pretty small. It's just one transaction for fill, label, and package our dip, right? But before we move into production tracking and on down the line, I do want to quickly, we're not going to be covering scheduling, the dynamic scheduling in this demonstration. We will actually have a unique and independent demo for that because it's well worth giving it the extra time. But what I do want to do is if I pop over into scheduling, you'll see that we are already queuing up the production plan and the impact that production plan will have on capacity. So if I go to our activity here, or operation, and I go to the load, and let's just go back to the beginning of this week and say 12, 21, 20, and let's look at the next 7 days. I only want to look at work orders that are firm, right? And we go ahead and hit OK. Let me stretch this out for you guys here a little bit. What you're seeing, and again, you have the ability to look at more cost centers, work centers, and across a different range of types of cost centers over a longer period of time, et cetera. But I think this is enough to help you guys understand what's taking place between our firm and potentially planned and suggested work centers. We're comparing our current capacity, which is 8 hours, right, against the current load, which is 20.31, and we get a overbooking or an overload of 20.3 hours. So the whole idea here is giving that planning and operations team insight right away into kind of how big our sandbag is. It's 25 pounds, and how much sand do we have? We have 50 pounds of sand to deal with. And as we get into our later discussion about the dynamic scheduling engine, we'll talk about how optimization can play a part in that, how we can move certain operations over to alternate resources and so forth. But it's important to understand the system immediately starting to get an understanding for that whole, X bag capacity, X amount of sand, right? How much do I have, and how much do I really need? And then the other thing I want to show here is that, and again, not a complex example, but as my example incorporates things like setup time, preparation time on the front end of the work center operation, the post run, maybe I have to do some cleanup or sanitation. I have the ability to track all those different colors based on color code. I also represent each of those tasks with a bar equal to the size of the actual amount of time. And if we were curious about that amount of time, we have the ability to pop into that and see what that time factor is. So again, a more complex multitasked production plan will allow me to see the full PERT diagram, with the first activity all the way through to the last activity, and breaking down each operation or activity into its color-coded time factor. So I also have a sense for what the whole process looks like, not just one little segment or section of it. Okay. All right. And then lastly, I think it's important to also point out that we'll be coming back in and referencing the status, because as this work order is worked on in production, that status information is going to update the work order and let us know the progression and the associated actual costs that have been accumulated against the work order. So for now, though, let's go ahead and close out of our work order and move to production tracking. And production tracking is where we're going to determine what actual activities we're working on, how long, when we start and stop them, and how much material are we going to use, and how much good and total product have we produced, right? So it's our way of capturing all that information to let production management know where we're at with the work order and any anomalies that may have come up in the labor or material usage processes. So first and foremost, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clock in our user. So in essence, let me just back up for a second. In essence, what I've done is I linked this from one visual process map to another visual process map, but this visual process map I created is more of a dynamic screen for employees to use on a Samsung Galaxy tablet or on a workstation out on the shop floor, where individuals can come up, they can clock in, they can do transactions. We support, breaks and lunch. We support the concept of elapsed labor. Hey, I just did this for 30 minutes. Boom, I want to put that in. And we also keep track of indirect labor. So if I have this employee and I want her to go to a meeting first, and then after she's done having the 401k meeting or whatever it may be, she can end that indirect labor and get back to her regular normal activity throughout the day. So in this particular case, my friend Natalie is logged in, and so we're going to actually do a transaction here. And one of the things that we support is handheld devices and barcode reading. So I'm using our ADC application, our Advanced Data Collection application, and I am going to have our friend Natalie log in. And as soon as Natalie logs in, we know what site she works in. And so, oops, sorry, I think I might have get her clocked in. Yeah. All right, there we go. And now let's get her started here. So I probably could have zapped her in there before, but here is Natalie, and here's the work order for Natalie, and operation is 5. So let's just get her kicked off on the setup, right? So she's now started that setup process. So it's accumulating her time on that work order on that particular machine, doing the activity of setting up. And let's just go ahead. I'm going to hit setups, stop, and I'm going to tell it again that it's, Natalie, and that's the work order. She can also look it up if for some reason it gets damaged or something, or it's not on the work order that we produce, which I will actually show you that in a second here. I should have showed that to you before. I apologize. But the great thing about this tool that I've used is that, or the screen that I built, the display, is that she has the ability to use it to access any of that type of information. So if she wants to print the work order, she can come here and using her, barcode or reprinting of that work order just to get it onto the screen. It's really easy for her to do that. So I'm kind of glad I waited, because now you guys can see this on the screen as an employee would be able to see it. She has visibility in real time to the latest and greatest work order. So again, barcodes are supported for this. So she's using these barcodes just like I'm using them here to read those transactions and materials and so forth in. But this is the work order. Now, the other thing that I probably should have pointed out is that when I create that work order, I do have the ability to either manually at the time produce that work order and perhaps schlep it on down to the production department head's office and say, here's another order that we have, or if I'm the production manager and I'm doing that, I can do that. But I also have the ability to produce them in real time. So I can set parameters within the system that says, hey, when I create the work order and I save it, I want you to produce the material usage document, the production slip, the production job ticket, whatever, et cetera, whatever it may be, the pick pack ticket, and we can output each of those one right after automatically to a specific printer. But again, it's nice to be able, as an employee, to be out on the shop floor. Maybe I left the work ticket, 15 feet over at the piece of equipment I'm working on, and I can just pop into here, type in the work order I've been working on, and boom, there it is on the screen. So while we're waiting, if I pop into the employee activity, and I'll just quickly put in Natalie, and her site is NA21, I can say, show me everything that she's done so far. And so you can see we have our transactions for the setup, both the machine and the labor transaction, and now we're on the run transaction. So she's accumulating time. She hasn't actually ended this yet. So let's go ahead and actually pop out of here and go back and do that. So let's do her run stop. Again, it's our friend Natalie. It's NA21. It's, get over here. There we go. That work order. It's function 5, which is Mac 34. How many did you complete? Well, I completed 43. All of them? Yep. None were rejected. Do you want to close? Yes, I do. Right? It was 43, right? Oops. There we go. There we go. And there we go. Now, one other thing I want to point out is that all of those transactions have been recorded, and during the setup of the transaction within X3, we can tell the system what can be accomplished when I complete certain tasks. Do I have to individually record my time and my work and setup and run and so forth? Do I have to individually record my material usage, or might my material usage have been done by another person, a warehouse person, and brought to me, and then they'll take back whatever I have left or whatever may be the case, and they'll do another material adjustment, or do I also have to tell it how many finished products did I produce? So I can do them all individually, I can do them all as a backflush. I can do all of them combined into a single transaction, which is exactly what I did just to speed up the process a little bit. So with the completion of my run, I was telling the system that I've accumulated my time, I've utilized the materials, and the material utilization is the exact amount that was predicted or planned. And I've also produced, as you saw, I recorded how many items did you produce, and none were rejected. So in this particular case, I'm just going to tell the system that I want to send those transactions. I want to post those transactions. And since the only job we worked on was the one that our work order, and I'm going to just go ahead and put in Natalie's information, and it's going to post those transactions so that they show up on the work order. So here you can see there are my material transactions right here, my operations, my employee time transactions. So those transactions have all been recorded. Now, the last thing I might need to do is log our friend Natalie out for the day. Maybe we fast forward and she's done. So the important thing about production tracking is that we're accumulating the information about when the employees started their day, any breaks that they took, any indirect labor that they were involved in, aka meetings, cleanup, whatever it might be. They take their lunch, they take some breaks. They do their manufacturing throughout the day. We record the different work orders they work against. We calculate the time that it took them to do the activities, the materials that they used, and the items that they produced. And if we go back now to our plan to produce visual process map, and we go back to our work order, and let's go to today, and this is our work order that we created, we now can see that our product has a line status of completed. Okay, if we scroll out a little bit, expected stock quantity 43, release quantity 43. If we scroll down a little bit further, here we have our components. They've all been completed. If we scroll out a little bit, consumed quantity, available quantity, right? So this is the consumed quantity that we, in making the product, we were required to utilize, and we've done that. And then finally down here, our operation, that MAC 34, the fill, label, and package function, we're all set. So if we go into status quickly, excuse me, when we look at our status, the first thing that jumps out to me, and I'm going to help you see it, is that those 43 items were put into a queue status. So that means that I have some sort of quality control process in place on this product, and we're going to have to go get those things out of there and put them into, we'll go through our quality assurance testing, and we'll see if they're good to go into the A status into inventory. But you'll notice here, again, we're seeing our information regarding the product, but we're also now seeing a visual representation of, are we over, are we under, did we do what we were supposed to do? And that's also true here for the components as well as our operations. All of the tracking detail that we recorded through transactions on the shop floor are here as well. If we scroll all the way back and I go to our WIP cost inquiry, now this job hasn't been officially closed out yet, and accounting transactions haven't been posted, but I'm looking at an actual versus expected with a variance, and then we're looking at the graph of all the elements of the costs associated with this particular work order. Okay, and if we scroll down, we're seeing our material transactions, our labor transactions, our machine transactions. We did not have any subcontracting. And then if we scroll down a little bit more, we can see any overhead that might have been applied. Okay, so there's our work order. We produced our product. Now, as we saw, we're going to jump to quality. And again, using my defined selections here, I've created a little one for today. And there's the quality record that was created. Now, my quality transaction is happening as a function of taking that finished product and moving it into inventory, and before we move it into inventory, we're required to do a quality control check. We also could have incorporated transactions for quality checks within the routing or within that production process, so that as they were moving through potentially multiple steps, we also could have asked them to stop, do a quality test, and then based on results, continue forward. So in this particular case, we have our quality record that was generated. You'll see here that we have our 43 items in Q status. We have none in A, none in R, and a total of 43. We've been assigned a lot, so our lot sequence defined that our lot number is LO 201 12 NA 021 0005. It's also been given an expiration date, and if we scroll over, you'll see that it's actually being held up in quality in the location type CQU in a quality location with a ID or code of QUA04. And it is still in our NAO 21, but we're required to do a quality record. So I'm going to come to my action card. I'm going to select quality record. And in this particular case, I kept it very, very simple. We're looking at all 43. Our raw material certification pH level of 7. Let's pretend I tested that and it was 7, and percent moisture is 4. So what we're looking at right now is called a tech sheet, and that tech sheet is the requirements associated with this product under the quality control testing procedure. And there's a lot of different variations of questions and entry ranges that are, does it fall within an acceptable range? And there's additional activity that can happen with a failure and so on. And just like with scheduling and some of the other more specific features of the system, quality is going to be a whole nother section that we're going to take time to carve out time to go through in detail. So I'm not going to get into too much detail right now, but what we're simply doing is we defined a tech sheet made up of questions that we created for the purpose of accumulating data regarding the quality test of this product, this specific product, and we're capturing that data here. And if it had not been satisfactory, we might have failed the quality check, or we may have even gone deeper into another level quality check using a tech sheet that might ask us even more information and so on. So I've got my quality record. Now what I need to do is, based on my results, I need to tell X3 how much and where I'm going to put this inventory into the inventory system. So or into inventory location. I'm sorry. So in this particular case, it's saying how many are past quality, and I say all 43. Their new status is going to be A. Their new location type is going to be in storage, and by default, based on, again, my product site default settings or parameters for this product, it's going to put it in store or stow 01. If I did want to drill in and find a different location, I can do that, but that's the suggested location. And so I'm going to go ahead and say save, and I'm going to save the whole transaction. And now I'm going to back out and go back to our inventory. And it's important to understand that through this process, right, we've had full visibility, all the way back here at the sales order through MRP. As we got into the work order through the planning workbench, we've had that visibility into our raw materials and our finished goods and semi-finished goods or intermediates inventory items, right? So this whole process is keeping everything tightly integrated and aware of all the different types of transactions that might be going on. And that visibility is a critical aspect. It's real time, and it helps us manage inventory to the level needed, which increases our ability to keep that with that right level of inventory. We're not putting too much cash. We're not tying up our cash in holding excess inventory, nor are we trying to cut it close, maybe catching ourselves and causing us to to actually fall late on orders, making some customers upset and so forth. So vendors like this more because we have a more predictable ordering cycle. Customers like it more because we're not always running behind, waiting for materials to arrive and so forth. And production managers love it because they're not losing capacity with people sitting around doing nothing. So how do we know that inventory got there? Well, the last thing that I want to do is for us to jump. Let me just put my barcodes away here. I want to jump to our detailed stock. And in detailed stock, what I want to do is do a lookup for our specific inventory item. Give me just 1 second here. And put my gun down, my handheld. And let's go ahead and look for product FIN 301. And let's do a search. And there is the lot that was created for us. Let's call it 0005. And if we do a search, we can now see that yes, in fact, those 43 for that lot have been put into storage location ST001 and has a stock status of A, right? So now it's available to be used, and we've just increased our stock by 43 cases. And I think the last thing I want to quickly do is just help you guys understand by jumping to the traceability and looking backward on this particular lot, we can see all of the transactions, if you will, and types of transactions that occurred throughout that plan to produce process, right? And this is probably the most powerful thing. Besides the integration and besides the transfer of information, correct information across the process so we know the right materials, right operations, the right amount of time, the right amount of materials and so forth, we're also getting that referenceability to all of the pieces, parts that make up this finished product FIN 301. And it's the traceability of each of those and where they were used and even, what customer, if we go back to the sales order and that whole accounting part of the process and the pick, pack, and ship process, all of those different transactions eventually get recorded and are traceable back through this traceability engine to the particular product or from a raw material, up to the end product that they created. So it's a very, very powerful tool, tightly keeping track of everything that's going on. Kind of in a conclusion, as you can see with X3's end-to-end plan to produce business process, production planning can be pretty quick and easy, especially as you get further along with X3 and you're using the data and you're using analytics to make sure that everything is honed in. It becomes a process of utilizing the MRP results, utilizing the workbenches, whether that be for planning or purchasing or subcontracting, to manage what's going on, right? So you're managing by exception. You're not being bogged down using multiple tools or different islands of information to sort of manage that production process, which is kind of the way it's done, has been done in the past. By forecasting and using MRP, right, we're making accurate suggestions that can be a company can allocate resources, plan for the necessary inventory, avoid communication mistakes, which are costly. Errors cause costs to go up. Capture actual costs on the shop floor in real time. Analyze the performance using tools like SDNA and other standard reports that are built into X3, and then through that gain a higher level of business intelligence. And when you're at a higher level of business intelligence, you're more agile. You have the ability to make accurate but quick decisions, so you're not left sort of with your hands in your pockets, second guessing yourself, and all that leads to a company becoming more competitive in this global economy. And I think that that's a good overview of the plan to produce. So I thank you for joining me today, and look forward to talking to you again in the future.